I'm a coach. I'm Jonas. I played rugby growing up. I fell into athletics by accident. I was just searching for greatness during my master's. I was searching for expertise and I was struggling to find it. And so I found it in athletics and found it in a master coach in Dan Paff. And really, I think most of the next 10 years after that, I spent experimenting and trying to apply what I had learned from Dan during my master's thesis. I studied him as my case study, and even my lecturers said, it's not possible. When I described Dan and his expertise across multiple ologies, he said, it's not possible. And I said, this is him. He said, it's not possible. And I still wrote my thesis on him and created a blueprint of his heuristics, and then spent probably 5 to 6 years just applying it. And then the next 10 years after that, refining it into what is mine, as opposed to just Dan's methodology. And so if I'm from the school of Paff, I'm a Paffite. I've spent a lot of time doing rehab, a lot of time coaching sprinters and some sub-10 sprinters and Olympic medalists and world ranked athletes. And then spent a lot of time in rugby and football, recently in NFL and college football. And now I'm even trying to make my way over to Australia. So I'm learning about Aussie rules and I'm learning about NRL, which is very similar in some ways to rugby, but Aussie rules I would think, is one of the ultimate sports, because they have to sprint, they have to wrestle, they have to have a very large endurance, their training volumes and their game volumes of sprint distance is huge. They're covering lots of metrics, yet they're really agile and they can be tackled from any angle. So it's a 360 sport. I've never experienced it. I got to watch a couple teams a few weeks ago and that really surprised me. It's not the best bio in the world. I've gone from bit to bit, but essentially I'm a coach. I love therapy. I love science. I'm a bit black and white in how I look at the world, but I understand the need for the gray and the complexities of life. And I'm a dad and I'm a business owner now. I'm learning to be a CEO. I'm learning to delegate and get my hands off and let people make mistakes, but not too many mistakes. And that's really the job of a father, a husband, and a CEO. It's all the same stuff, right? There you go.
That's unbelievable. Let's start with the master's in coaching science, and then the fact that you got to do it on Dan. That just sounds like an awesome education. Here at Strength Coach Network, we're trying to bridge the gap between university and what happens in the real world, but doesn't sound like that was the case for you. Just kind of elaborate.
No, it wasn't the case. I guess when I was doing my degree, I should have been playing rugby, but I was injured early. So by my second year of my degree, I was coaching equine, I was coaching rehabbers, I was learning to be a personal trainer. I was walking into my lectures, learning bits and literally exiting and going and trying to apply them. So, I think that's because I couldn't get the itch of playing consistently. I didn't just want to go out on a piss and chase girls or whatever. Not that I didn't do that, but that wasn't fulfilling for me. It's more like, okay, I guess I was maybe old for my age. Even as a 13-year-old rugby player, I would hear my coach say something, absolutely understand exactly what he meant, but turn around and look at my friends and my teammates and see that a third of them really didn't get it and a third of them maybe got it a bit. And I would be the conduit, I'd be the translator, even at a young age. So I definitely find learning about sports science and coaching and communication and stuff like that relatively intuitive. So by my third year, I was already like deep in Verkhoshansky and Matviev and all of the East German stuff. I always give credit to the Canadian coaching athletic, whatever the last word is, but Derek Evely and Kevin Tyler had that website, and that website was my Google for everything to do with training methodology, periodization, coaching science. And then the podcast that Derek did to summarize all of the library of information he had probably changed my world. There was no other resource that was doing anything like it. And since that point, everyone talks about Bondarchuk and everyone talks about complex theory and everyone talks about all those things. And it's great because now it's common vernacular. But back then, if it wasn't for that website, you would be trawling through bad translations and people's perceptions of it. And I think Derek and Kevin did an absolutely great job of getting all of the old gold back into new language and back into it made it accessible for all of us. So I guess I got to my degree, I was already reading that stuff, making sense of it, got to my master's and had a choice. And my choice was to learn about expertise. And I really liked the idea of heuristics and expertise and being able to, if you look at experts, they have key rules of thumb, key almost attractors for how they make decisions. I wanted that. I didn't want to have to be challenged when making decisions. I wanted to have like I said, I'm a bit black and white. I know rules make sense, and I know rules have boundaries, and you need to know the rules before you can break them and all of that other stuff. So I just wanted to find someone who was great so they could direct my decision making and direct my process for learning. And I searched and searched in the UK, and I searched in rugby because that's the sport I was based in. And I found that everyone in team sports was essentially just making sense of what they had from the athletics world, but even then weren't really applying it in what I thought was necessary for it to be universal. So I had a choice. I went to Canada to visit Derek and Kevin in the Edmonton University, and I almost did a PhD. And I always say this, it would have been great to be Dr. Dodu. My mum would have been like, she could retire. But I didn't think it would be genuine to become a professor and essentially a doctor, or essentially an expert in sprinting if I hadn't coached anyone particularly fast. So it was at that point, my mum was like, that would be a nice idea and we would miss you to be in Canada, but it sounds like you need to coach athletics. And I had never coached athletics before. And I was like, okay, that's what I need to do. I guess the master's was great because it was not about technical knowledge. It was about developing expertise, reflective practice, communication, again, reflective practice, how to look from outside and look in and fast track your own personal development, identify your bias. Everyone's got blinkers on. Identify your blind spot, not just technical blind spots, mostly emotional and cognitive blind spots based on your biases, based on your history, based on your likes, your dislikes, based on your network. The bigger your network, be the dumbest person in the room because you will always learn. So all the stuff that you talk to any or listen to any entrepreneur or any kind of guest speaker, the motivational speaker, all the stuff they say is true, 100%. But for me, I learned it very early on in my career and in my personal development as an adult, as opposed to just being a kid in school. And it probably underpinned everything I've done since that point. So yeah, masters in expertise and when I say in expertise is studying experts. You study a chess player who's an expert. You study an astronaut. You study a pilot or a surgeon or a school teacher or an engineer. You can study all of them and you can actually find some common denominators. There are common things that they do. There are common problems that other people have that they don't have because they've got the right processes and principles in place. And even though a lot of it is to do with technical knowledge, heuristics, simple rules of thumb, creating skeleton keys is another way of putting it. But there's also this psychological, emotional part where they are in search of the truth as opposed to their truth, as opposed to what they want. Really is what this true scientific method really should be, right? Where you're not bringing your bias to the table and you're not ignoring signs that you're wrong, you're searching for signs that you're wrong. I love to debate, like me on Twitter, I'll put out something and I want to hear people tell me things that I don't believe. And a lot of people will lean into the people that are supporting their rhetoric. And that's nice, it's good for the ego, gives you a boner, makes you feel good. But actually, I learn best if I find especially if they're smart, especially if they're good at what they do and they don't agree with me, or they have a different perspective, I lean into those guys. I will go back and forth and ask them open questions. If they think it's confrontational because it's in Twitter, I'll DM, I'll email, I'll Zoom. Like those are the people that I want to talk to, because if you're smart and you don't agree with me, I want to know why. Because you could have that little part of my blind spot really clear. And actually by me looking at you and debating with you and then now reflecting on what I believe, I will either come out of it smarter because I would have added an iteration to a heuristic or perspective, or I'll come out of it more confident, because by breaking it down and making it really clear, I'm even more clearer that what my perspective is accurate, at least at this moment in time. And that is I didn't know this at the beginning, but I've learned that can be a challenging thing for people, because the process of that, you have to be vulnerable and believe that maybe the past 15 years of doing something, you could have been wrong at some point. And that is hard for a lot of people. But for me, it's just, it is what it is. That's the past, right? I'm in the present right now, and I want to be more right for tomorrow, not mourn and cry about not being right yesterday. And again, even the way I'm wording this, being right, being wrong, it becomes part of your personality. It's how I identify myself. It's not about that. It's in search of truth. It's in search of being better. It's in search of being more clear. It's in search of just, I guess, the unattainable, perfect perspective. And if that is the higher goal, and enjoyment of that journey is the higher goal, you can rip apart what I've done for the past 15 years and say, did you know that all of that was wrong? And I'll be like, where? Show me, because I'll be better. Whereas I do have many discussions with people who are like, shit, that is terrible to find out. And I'm absolutely disappointed. And my whole ego is being driven by that thing. And it's tough, man, because then you start to realize, if you go into organizational politics, and when I go into clubs, like big clubs with people with big roles who are paid big salaries, they often can't afford to have that level of vulnerability and that level of, I'm happy to make iterations, because their whole stature and their whole, their position is based on, I'm right, or this is the way forward for the company, and everyone buy in. And actually, if I identify myself as having an error, the way I presented my ideas in the beginning, which is come to Jesus, come and listen to this, it can now be, people can challenge it. Whereas at the same scenario, I'll work with some great practitioners in those same positions who have set themselves up in those positions with a perspective of, we can all be wrong. And actually, and to answer this or to describe this, I'll change topic. There is some research on Fortune 500 companies and successful ones versus companies that go bust with the same kind of investment in the early doors. And when you look at how many errors they make, so how many mistakes the staff make and how many mistakes in terms of the product or whatever it is, they have an equal amount of errors, or they both make errors. The difference is the successful companies identify those errors really quickly and address them. They invite the errors. They invite the employees to identify where they've made an error, and they address the error together and they move forwards. These other companies would hide the errors. The employees would think they will be marked down or lose their jobs. So they would hide, and then those errors, if you build a house on shoddy ground, it's going to fall down at some point, right? So if there are errors hidden in your code or hidden in your processes and no one identifies, and you build, it's going to come crumbling down, right? Whereas if there are errors in your code that are identified, and then there's a bit of an open discussion, why do you think we had those errors? You start creating processes that multiply and having positive compounding interest on the way up. And so errors, if you make a mistake, you haven't made a mistake, you've made a finding. You found that there are 9 routes to go home, and I went down the wrong road and I hit a barrier. Great. Because I'm going to have to go home every day for the next 100 days, for example, right? So if now I've learned that route I shouldn't go down, then I won't do it again. And I'll tell my mom, and I'll tell my mates, and I'll tell my friends, and I've learned something. I could cry because today I added an extra 15 minutes to my journey home. Or I could be happy because now I've learned and that happiness about creating errors is something that I think is critical in great learners, in people that enjoy the process. And when you find talented athletes, like the best athletes I've worked with, they bounce back from defeat or from injury or from whatever it is, like it's a learning moment. Great. I'm disappointed today. I'm hurt, or we lost, or I ran slow, or whatever it is. But you know what? After today's initial emotional response, I'm pretty pleased because I know not to do it again. And so, yeah, that's my tangent. But yeah, essentially experts, not all, but a lot of them, the ones that I would want to mirror, have this ability to keep moving forwards. You get hit by a barrier, you just keep moving forwards. They're all about solutions. I've got a new company, Speed. Solutions and solution mindset is something that I've always been preaching within my athletes and now within my staff. It's very easy to identify all the problems. That's wrong, that's wrong. If we're watching about, we're not going to talk about running mechanics too much, but if we're watching a run, for example, lots of people will say he can get better by changing this and this. And a lot of that is superficial, is effect. I rather focus on cause. Before identifying what's wrong, I want to know across the different running styles, what are the common themes that we should always see? Or across one athlete, when he runs slow, medium, and fast, what are the common themes that allow him to run fast, that allow other people to run fast? Then I'm going to ignore all of the other peripheral stuff, and I just want to focus on those 3 common themes. Because what I've learned is when you address those common themes, those other things that everyone's pointing at, they go away. But when you try to address the things that everyone's pointing at, it only changes that one thing. It doesn't have a compounding effect. These 3 major things, these major heuristics have a compounding effect. When you change one of them, you can change multiple of the other peripheral effects. So I say, my wife says I'm lazy, I say I'm efficient. I don't want to because we work together. She could say, okay, we've got this email, we've got this problem, we've got this. And I'll take a step back and I'm like, I don't want to go through every one of those issues. Let's take a step back. What are the common themes? Communication about something very specific, or we don't have a process for this over here, or actually there is no real problem. It's one of 9 different tasks that I'm trying to do today. So I'm multitasking, and actually we just need another member of staff to offload it. So the order, we could spend 2 hours going through every one of the little issues, and we may still do that. But before we do that, I want to take a step back and say, before we go and try to solve all of these little things, is there something we're missing in our process? Is there a system that we need to put in place? Yes or no? The answer may be we don't know. Okay, sometimes when you go into those 19 different things and you come back out and go, well, actually, number 1, 6, 7, 8, and 9 were the same problem. They were voiced in a different perspective. It's 9 people looking at an elephant and pulling the tail, pulling the ear, blindfolded, and describing the elephant in different ways. But actually, when you take your blindfold off, you realize, oh, it's the same shit. And so she says I'm lazy. I say I'm efficient.
That's not just you, brother. That's could probably be, I mean, it's me, but maybe multiple other listeners out there. Hearing you say all that, one of the things that I kept thinking was, how did you learn it? That resiliency, because you said a lot of people don't do it. How did you learn it? And then from the people you studied and the people that you've worked with that are great, was there ever an aha moment, or what was the common theme for all of them?
I'll be honest, something inside me always felt like that heuristics were real. Until I learned the word and learned about experts, I still had a feeling inside me, based on how I problem solved anyway, that if you took a step back and saw the forest for the trees, you would find the correct path. So that was always inside me. I always had that kind of feeling. I've always enjoyed puzzles and problem solving. And when you got a puzzle in front of you, what's the easiest thing to do to get started? Start with the corners, right? You get the corners up. Okay, what's the second easiest thing? Get everything with a flat edge, so you know it's the border, all in one place. What's the next thing? Well, put the similar colors together, right? You may not know anything about what the end picture looks like, but these are common things that you can solve as long as it's a typical square or rectangular puzzle, right? Life isn't always that simple, but there's still those principles that you can apply, right? And so firstly, I've always thought that there is an efficient way and an inefficient way to solve puzzles and problems. Secondly, I've always sought out people that were smarter than me, right? I've always done that. I've always sought out, even if you're not smarter than me, that you've got deep experience in your environment, right? And then secondly to that, you can articulate that experience, right? Thirdly to that you have the emotional fortitude, I made it up, like your ego isn't fragile, so that when you tell me the good stories, you also tell me the bad stories. What do they call it? Survivorship bias. Don't just tell me how, this is Dan, don't just tell me how you got all these Olympians to get medals and show me your training model. Show me when your athletes got broken. Tell me the why behind why you think you made mistakes, or what the constraints were or context was why they got broken. And then also tell me how you fixed them. And lastly, tell me from that journey of breaking, reflecting, iterating to fixing, how has that now changed your general model going forward? And again, I'll talk about Dan Paff because he's the easiest one. Dan has been educating coaches before I was even in secondary education. He's been coaching Olympians before even I probably had hair on my balls, right? So the reality is he's been coaching for a very long time. Now, if you talk to Dan about, and he showed you his program and his process right now, I would argue it's an iteration that he's created over the past couple decades. And there are things he was doing back in the early 80s, mid 80s, 90s, whatever it is, that you will still see presence of it in his program now, but there are iterations. So in studying him, I had the now Dan, the previous Dan, and then I had lots of like in programs, and then had lots of recordings of what Dan felt about his program and the why behind it. And that's pretty powerful, because every coach will post online, this is what I do, take my program, or these are my principles, take my program. That's great. I want to watch them in the fire. Like a cook, you can have a recipe, great. I want to see the cook. I want to see the cook problem solve. I want to see the cook deal with the fact that he's now in a new kitchen and the stove's a tiny bit different, or his supply of eggs are a bit different, or the flour is a bit different. Like, I want to see how he iterates, because it's one thing it's another thing seeing how he actually deals with problems. And that's probably another skill set of mine. I think it's a gift and a curse. If someone goes and runs really fast and gets an Olympic medal, I will say, woohoo. And if someone gets hurt, I'll say, oh, but my body language won't change very much right there and then. I might have to be reminded to congratulate myself. And I might have to be reminded to show, not remorse, but to show empathy about something bad happening. And I say reminded, or remind myself, I will see how other people are responding and go, oh yeah, okay, I need to be a bit more emotional here. Yeah, I've learned that I've had athletes complain to me 10, probably 8 years ago now, that when shit hits the fan, we don't really know if you care. I'm like, why don't you think I care? Because we don't see it on your face. And I'm like, okay, let's flip the script. If we're in a car crash and I'm screaming and I'm just as emotional as you, how would you feel? If one propeller went off on a plane and we're going down, and I was screaming and I'm the captain, I'm the pilot, how would you feel? And they're like, yeah, no, we would feel worse, because we would feel hopeless. So there's I don't think it's rational why I do it. I just think it's my emotional control. I think that's how I am. I take time to process. I will be happy or sad about something the next day. And I've learned to show emotion on my face right now. Anyway, I think I'm digressing from the point. I think the major point is that great people don't necessarily want to be great. It's just part of their DNA. And the people that I like to study, it's part of their DNA. They have processes behind it. Sometimes it's OCD. Sometimes it's just being control freaks. Sometimes it's just being geeks and being so obsessed with something that it forces them to look to the depths of a topic. And I very much gravitate towards those types of people, because they can articulate stuff. And then I quiz. They give me an answer, I say why. They give me an answer, I say when. They give me an answer, I say how. And I just keep doing it until I get down to the bottom of what really matters. And that's really, and I've got a very good network, not because I tried to network, but because I tried to learn. And because I just want to know the best of the best. And the best don't have to be their work with Olympians. I've learned that over a long time now. The best for me are the people that are really clear of their process. It's founded in strong roots of training theory, sports science, or just any kind of ology, as well as critical thinking and personal experience and personal experimentation. And their egos aren't fragile, so they're really open to talk to you about how many eggs they cracked before they made that omelet. Like, I want to know those details. And so I think and because I'm like that as well, I think when I find people like that, there is a synergy, and I can easily drain them of their knowledge. And then I have a framework, and I'm like, I got a great bullshit filter, and I'm like, put that through the filter. And then what comes out the end is, this is usable, this works, I can apply it straight away. And then what doesn't come out the end, I'm like, I'll go back and question more. I'm like, I can't compute this as usable yet. I need to ask you more. What, why, how, what, why, when. I sound like a kid. That's how my son is with me. Like, we're doing this, why? We're doing this, when? We're doing this, how? When you're frustrated or when you're busy, like, you can't hear it. But when you're open-minded, you do realize they're just learning. They're just being inquisitive. And sometimes, like, you just want to give them a quick answer for them to get out of the room. But that always bites you in the ass, because they come back and actually they're now basing your decision-making on a shoddy foundation. And then they'll bring that back to you at another point. And you're like, crap, okay, no. And so having enough time, and this is probably a part of this conversation as well, my work-life balance, my product, my company, my work as a coach or a mentor or consultant, I'm trying to do what Keir's done, essentially. He's really set the tone for me. And I'm like, do what's necessary to bring in the cash, to make yourself happy for your work, but so much so that you can be the dad you want to be. And professional sport doesn't really, like, right now, I don't really want to go and work full-time for one team. And someone could throw a great work-life balance and great cash flow, and I could change my mind and go and do it, right? But in most scenarios, you've got to bleed to be one of the family, and you've got to treat the club or the team as your family, but your family can easily disown you when they feel like it. And that's not really a strong family. Whereas my kids, even if they hate me, they're still my kids. My wife, even if she hates me, she's still my wife. And I want to do the best of my ability to make her hate me. And so you have a choice. You do everything in your power to support one family, which is at work, that is a temporary family, or you do everything in your power to do what you need to do at work, so that you can do what you need to do in life. And so in the past 32 minutes, I've gone from one tangent to the other, but hopefully.
I'm sticking with you, man. And I think everybody else will too, because when you speak, people are going to listen, because whether you're going to admit it or not, you're one of those experts, right? You're one of those people that it would be interesting to see if somebody had researched you and understood, okay, this is his iteration of things. This is how he's evolved with things. Because going into that a little bit with you and your ability to detach and be reflexive, what have you noticed about yourself? You just talked about your emotional intelligence. What has changed about you, whether it is maybe your programming or any other attribute about yourself? You talk about Dan's iteration. What would you say if somebody had studied you, had been your iteration in your evolution from the last 5-10 years, whatever you want to say?
Good point. My product, really, and how I look at the world: projection, switching, reactivity. I summarize most, if not everything, into those three boxes, be it my S&C, be it my change of direction model, be it my rehab model, be it my model for sprinting or braking or change of direction. I guess my iteration is those three key themes. And I love training programs. Me and my wife can gnaws over training programs. We have done for years. And when I was, so maybe 10 years ago, when I was with British Athletics, I had a bit of budget to spend. And what I did was I went to the States and I went across the southern counties. So I went from Florida to LSU to Texas A&M. I stopped and met Lance Browman. I stopped and met Boo Schickschneider. And I purposely went to, and so this is maybe 3 or 4 years after I had written my thesis, but I purposely went to coaches and systems that had learned from Dan Paff at some point, and purposely selected a group of coaches that I knew really utilized and saw him as a mentor, as well as people that were like, don't really drink that Kool-Aid anymore. And there was a main reason. I knew that Dan's system was made up of heuristics, and he would call it an eclectic collection of training systems or training theory. You look across Dan's week, he's got a nice balance across each training session for each of the key training components. And then you look at his program over 12 weeks or over 46 weeks, and you can see how there is prioritization in different phases, and then lower prioritization in other phases, and how there is a drip feed of increase in velocity over time, and how that corresponds with volume, with sometimes the volume dropping as well as the velocity increasing, with sometimes things stabilizing while once increases, and in some scenarios both dropping at the same time in order to allow for supercompensation. So you see his program, you see his training components, you see how one training component is done for a number of weeks, only to be reduced or completely left out for another iteration of a training component. And you recognize that, oh, that was doing that across different sessions in order to build this. And that is doing that in order to build this. So Brad DeWeese uses a phrase, phase potentiation, right? Similar kind of concept. Charlie Francis will have his concurrent training model and his lovely graphs that I'm sure Derek Hansen was part of creating them, right? There are different iterations of doing very similar things. So when people argue, or Charlie or Dan or whoever it is that they're arguing is a better coach or has a better system, what I love about Dan's system is it can be applied to most scenarios, to most event groups, to early rehabbers, to late rehab, to kids. But you don't apply the same thing. Dan's whole philosophy, or at least how I read his philosophy, is that any system should be able to expand or be shrunk. So a year program should be, the concepts and principles should be able to be shrunk into a 12-week macro, or should be able to be shrunk into a 4-week program cycle and still hold truth. And that is amazing as a concept. And if you really understand that as a concept, then planning is simple. If you understand the underpinning, not the sets and reps of today, not how many speed sessions in a week. It's more like the principles and processes, that the heuristics that define why you would, where you would, and how you would expand or shrink it. And so I went to the States and I studied these coaches, and I studied them for a reason, because a lot of their programs you could find online, or you could find a podcast or an article, more articles back then, not so many podcasts. But when you then see it in reality and you quiz them about what they do and why they do it, you'll notice that even the people that say, I'm not really into Dan or whatever it is, Dan probably gave them education at some point in their USA track and field qualification, or they've learned from him. So they would say, I'm not really into Dan, and then you'll see their program and they've got some key concepts, copy and pasted from Dan's principles. It's great. Because are they Dan's principles, or are they an eclectic collection of the general rules that we should apply to training? And that was really empowering. So I don't know how I'm answering your question, but what I would say here is that I like to stress check. I like to understand something deeply from an individual. And even when I'm 100% committed, I'm married to that concept, I want to stress check it. I wouldn't stress check my marriage. That's the wrong thing to say. But life, having kids is a stress check of your marriage, quite frankly. Going through COVID, we've near enough got a COVID baby, right? We lost all of our consultancy. I lost all of my income. I lost my training group. And I was sick for 3 months during COVID. If that's not a stress check, then maybe, no, that is a stress check, right? But in the concepts, in understanding deeper theory, I always quiz and try to understand deeply. Now, your point was, if I was to look at my own iterations, what would I say? And I would say that I've taken track and field principles, understood what I would say is Dan Paff's planning principles, at least how I see it. I've tried to use it in developing athletes and had reasonable success. taking a group of 6 or 7 kids from a 2-mile radius of North London, and 6 years later, all of them going to the Olympics, and some of them being world medalists. And another 5 years later, I'm looking at them and they're with other coaches and they're still doing great things. Taking that same principle and process and applying it to rugby and it having success within the corrective environment. Applying it to rehab, applying it to football, soccer, and then being able to coach other people to take it on board and create their own iterations. So I guess the answer to your question is, I think the basic principles were really clear early doors, and then knowing how to stretch or shrink is really been what the past 10 years is. And actually, when I did my master's thesis, I said to myself, why am I going into athletics? And the answer was, if I can peak an individual within a certain number of days after a 300-day cycle of training and get them fittest, fastest, strongest, and most confident in that very discrete area by juggling all of these training components over time, if I can solve that puzzle, every other team sport, every other rehab is going to be easy. Right. So that was really the PhD for me. If I can solve and create clear processes for planning and periodization for track and field, for very challenging things, stopwatch sports, all very challenging, then I'll be able to shrink it, manipulate it, make sense of it when you start to dilute it when it comes into team sports. Yeah.
So that's why you've decided to now come over to America and Australia and just continue to build this brand. It's unbelievable that you've, like you said, you had that level of success exactly where you're from. And then on your quest for world domination and getting, what is it? In the Avengers movies, all the different stones, the Infinity Stones on your hand, just the different countries that you're going to go.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm aware that I'm only me and my brand is Jonas. Okay. No, the brand should be Speedworks. And I can only coach so many people, and I get more enjoyment from talking to a fitness coach or a rehabber in a team who's had me in for 6 weeks to learn things, and they've jumped on Zooms and they've done the course and they've gone and practiced, and they now feel very competent to do something that in their sport is different. Like speed training in team sports only 5 years ago was like, what's the bloody point? Running mechanics for injuries only 2 years ago was very much, there is no correlation. There is no, the ivory towers of research will say we haven't had the research. So if the research isn't there, then you can't say it's true. And it's not that I want to prove people wrong, because that's not my motivation at all. It's that I see it as being a truth, and it feels like most of the arguments for it not being a truth, that movement matters, yeah, that people will argue that's not a truth or is low in a priority. Most of those arguments are based on lack of skill, lack of expertise, not actually trying fully, not trying in the right environment, or bloody fear of trying in the first place, yeah. And that the echo chambers of that sport it's always been done this way, and all of those other things, and that's not for this sport, or our football players aren't sprinters, so we don't need that information. All of that echo chamber has been the biggest barrier. So one sport, one injury at a time, I've just wanted to show that it's BS, essentially, and empower people to make better decisions. And am I trying to get my infinity rings? Yeah, maybe, for sure. I think at the end of the day, 2 arms, 2 legs, running, gravity, generally on turf. Each sport has its individual nuances, but we all know that player availability is critical. We all know that during game-changing situations, there's a break, there's a sprint, there's a transition run. We all know that invasion games are about creating and taking space, and that, yes, there's the cognitive, there is the reading shapes, and there is the making decisions thing, and actually seeing the holes and the gaps. But once a gap is seen, you need to have the confidence and the hardware to go through that gap. So we know that being able to run fast, break quickly, or stop quickly, change direction quickly, but also all of those things done efficiently increases the tolerance of the players, potentially increases the effectiveness of the players, and definitely increases their confidence. So these things are like clear as day, but there are so many environments that we ignore it until someone's hurt, or until a coach says, this is an issue, go and address it, as opposed to it being the fundamental of what you use to both, Jordan Mendegucci says, prepare and repair. If you have a clear model of movement, you know how to prepare. And Vern says movements, not muscles. But if you have a very clear understanding of the functional biology, the muscles, and how that connects to the movements, then you have your strength and conditioning portfolio. If you have a clear understanding of the movements and the biomechanics and what makes people efficient, then you have even more justification for that strength and conditioning portfolio. So I just hear so much survivorship bias and so much fear in change that it irritates me, because I know that those are the two barriers to people learning. So it's because I know that's a barrier to people learning and it irritates me, I want to teach to get over those barriers. Because then the more people that are applying a more fundamental based process, the more investigation happening in that environment, the more insights, the more I learn. So it's just selfish. I want more people to know what I know so they can take it into their environments and come back and tell me the shit I don't know right now. Yeah, or give me confidence that I know some more shit. Either way, it's probably very selfish of me to try to educate as many people as I can. Again, why create speed solutions? I posted a video. It's got nearly 500,000 views.
Oh, wow.
Read the comments. Everyone looks at running a tiny bit differently. And that's fine. Again, blindfolded people looking at an elephant and pulling the tail and say, oh, it might be a snake, pulling the ear and going, it might be a handbag or whatever it is, right? But the reality is, I would love to be in a place where we collect all of those differences and we can be aware of the commonalities. Because if we can do that, is the best, most effective and exciting research project in the world. People collectively in different environments, different sports, with different types of athletes, at different stages in their career, collecting similar data sets with a similar process and being able to communicate and learn with each other. Like that to me is the ultimate research project. So
that sounds like a massive international, interdisciplinary, like metadata.
And I've talked to some of the best researchers in Australia, in South Africa, in the UK, and America, and I've said, guys, what if we collaborate? What if we collaborate? What if we're all using the same kind of system and we collaborate and we can get over what people talk, oh yeah, he's a football player, he shouldn't sprint like this. Look at the fastest football players and they look like track and field athletes. Look at the slowest track and field athletes and they look like football players. So are we saying that our sport doesn't allow us to do something, or the athlete shouldn't? Or are we saying the level of the athlete and the hardware that they have in their limbs and the software that they have for coordination, that the level of the athlete is what differs? I think that's the case, and I've seen that consistently across the board. And yet you still have so much ivory tower, and I do think it is ivory tower researchers who, because we haven't got gold standard of team sports, will make their assumptions, and some of it's just because if there's no evidence that they believe in, then it can't be true. Do you know there's no research done on parachutes? There's none.
I did not know that.
There's zero research done that parachutes work. But we are humans, and before there were journals, we were running away from lions and climbing trees and learning which berries to eat and which berries gave us the shits. We were learning through doing and passing on those stories to our kids and to our tribes. We were learning through just having, and by all means, we have bias. We hear the wind, we think it's a snake, we run before we look to see if it really was a snake. So there is the bias of fear and surviving that can jade our discussions. And a good mentor can sometimes make you think something without questioning it. And I'll say another story. There's a story, and I'll jump to the big rocks of it. Let's say a kid is asking their parent about Thanksgiving dinner. At Thanksgiving, the parent cuts the turkey in half, puts it at the top of the oven, puts the other half at the bottom of the oven. And the kid says, why the hell do you do that? He said, that's the best way. It's our tradition. It's how your grandma did it. So the kid asks the grandma, why do we do that? And the grandma says, the best way, it's a tradition. It's how my dad did it. So she asked it. So maybe the dad's still alive, I don't know. And asked the great granddad, why do you cut the turkey? And the great granddad says, when we were young, our oven was really small and there was never enough space to put the whole turkey on one tray. So we used to cut it in half, put it at the top and the bottom. This is the reason why. But the story and the feeling of tradition changed the perception of the why by the time the Chinese whispers got down to the great grandkid. Now, that's the same thing that we see everywhere, all over the place. Again, that story is just a reminder that people will tell you their why, but until you ask again, how, what, why, tell me another story of what condition, then you get to the depths of the real beliefs. But do you need peer review research to make that a truth? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. I do think that there are enough smart people in the world who can question their bias enough to come up with truths. And in fact, they're probably the people that inspire the research to come out in the first place.
I could talk to you all day. I want to respect your time. Like I said, it's almost 11 o'clock for you. So once you leave, so you said you have the new business you've created, go ahead and let people know where they can follow you. We'll leave it in the show notes too, but just so people.
Yeah, I'm always on socials, eat, sleep, train _ or speedworks.training. I think that's Instagram and Twitter. Emails to info@speedworks.training if you want some help. And we've got the new company, speedsolutions.training. And that's where you can go if you want some support with more video analysis or in-house research projects around sprinting, change of direction, decel, and even some education for your staff around that stuff as well. So range of courses on our website, speedworks.training. You can go and buy some of that stuff. I'm not very good at promoting, so I'm remembering now. And yeah, reach out if you want some problem solved, if you want some support with anything. There's always ways to do some mentorship or Zoom calls or whatever it takes. And if you want me to come out and visit you guys, especially if you live in a sunny state, just give me a call.
Sounds good, brother. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations on making it to the end of the video. Why don't you celebrate by watching more videos just like it? You can also help us on our quest to placate the algorithm gods by liking, sharing, subscribing, and commenting. Thank you.